I want everybody to be really, really loud for me. Dobre večer, good evening, and welcome to the cafe. Aloha, everybody. It's great to see you. Thank you. It's great to see you. And even though I don't have a beer or something, I've got to give props to Baki, the guy that runs this place, and allows us to be here, because really, not many people would do that. So I have to say this for you. Nasa Sinaabe. Welcome, my friends. It's great to see everybody here. I've got to take a drink now. Yummy, yummy. Lots of reports on publishing stuff, since I can, I guess. For those of you who were not here last week, that was the beginning of the month, and I run 2 literary magazines on Scars Publications. One is Down in the Dirt magazine, and the August issue is out, which has a picture of a temperate rainforest on the cover, and it was also released as a 6x9 book. And CC&D was also released, and volume 223. And I think this one is cool because John Yatko, who's out of town right now, actually took a photo for this. I love this crane holding a globe. I thought that was awesome. So, and the other thing that was cool about publishing this month is that we do collection books. And after 4 months, because the issues are quite large, we would put these things together, sorted by author for each one. And because I was actually thinking if I move this to another location, I might call the open mic Prominent Pen for everybody. We've got Prominent Pen, the Dirt edition, and the CC&D edition, which carries May through August issues, but they're all sorted by author, so you can actually, like, oh, if you've appeared in multiple issues, you can alphabetically see everything, which is really kind of cool. And I said, I've had these things sitting on my desk, and as they're sitting there, I'm like, oh, there's some book, oh, I left a pen on a book. That's the picture on the book, and I would keep seeing it because it's actually the size of a pen, so it totally freaks me out. But those have just come out, and if anybody's interested in learning anything about publishing stuff, you can bug me or go to scars.tv and see all the publishing stuff that we do. It's mini feature night, but because I had talked with somebody in the audience about doing a short story, it might be a little long, but it happens to be in the book and in the Down the Dirt issue, Catch Fire in the Treetops, and it also happens to be in the collection book. I have to pull it out because I have to bring a copy along. The Window, which I was trying to read things from because I'm working on an audio CD as well. The Window, it's one of the stories in there. So I was thinking I would try to get this together so that people could check out that story as well, because it's not always just poetry here, I swear. But this is a short story I wrote, and it is called Gabriel. She had lived there in her 4th-floor apartment on the near north side of the city for nearly 3 years. It was an uneventful 3 years from the outside. Gabriel liked it that way. She just wanted to live her life, go to work, see her new friends, have a place to herself. But looking a bit closer, it was easy to see what a wonderful life she actually had. The apartment was impeccable, with green columns and glass vases lining the hallways, modern oil paintings lining her walls. She was working at a career for a little under 2 years, and she had received 2 hefty promotions. She served the board of directors for the headquarters of the National Domestic Abuse Clinic and single-handedly managed to increase annual donations to her city by 45%, as well as dramatically increase the volunteer base for their hotline numbers. She managed a boyfriend, a man who was actually willing to put up with her running around, working overtime for her job, visiting clients. A man who loved and respected her for her drive. Not bad for a woman almost 25. Yes, life seemed good for Gabriel. She would dine in fine restaurants, visit the operas and musicals traveling through the city. And she had only been in the city for 3 years. Eric would wonder, Eric being her boyfriend, Eric would wonder what her past was like. And when he would always hit a nerve with her, and then she'd charge off to work when he'd ask about it, not talking to him for days. She had only lived in the city for 3 years, and he knew nothing about her life before then. In the back of his mind, he always thought she was hiding something from him, keeping a little secret and sometimes everything Gabriel said made him believe this secret was real. She told him her parents lived on the other side of the country, and even though they dated for 2 years, they never ever talked about visiting them. She never received calls from her old friends. There were no old photographs. This would get to Eric sometimes. It would fester in him as he sat down and thought about it, all alone in his apartment, wondering when she would be finished with work. And then he'd see her again, and all his problems would disappear, and he'd feel like he was in love. One morning, he was sitting at a breakfast table reading her paper, and she was waiting so that they could drive to work. "Hey! They finally got the Mob King guy with some charges that they think will actually stick," he says to her. Gabriel minded her business, put on her makeup in the bathroom mirror, and sprayed her hair, curly brown hair. "Hey, Gabriel, get a load of this quote," Eric shouted from the hallway to her from his seat. He could just barely see her shadow through the open door of the bathroom. "My client is totally innocent of any charges against him. It is the defense's opinion that Mr. Lucio was framed, given to the police by the organized crime rings in the city as a decoy," said Jack Huntington, defense lawyer for the case. "Furthermore, the evidence is circumstantial and weak." What a joke. I hope this guy doesn't get away with all he's done. And you know, if I... Gabriel stopped hearing his voice when she heard the name. She had heard Lucio over and over again in the news, but Jack, she didn't expect this. Not now. It had been so long since she had heard that name. But not long enough. Her hands gripped the edge of the ceramic sink, grabbing tighter and tighter until she began to scratch the wood paneling under the sink. Her head hung down, the ends of her hair falling around her face. He lived outside of the city, nearly 2 hours. Now he was here, maybe 10 minutes away from her home, less than a mile away from where she worked, where she was about to go. She couldn't let go of the edge of the sink. Eric stopped reading aloud and was already reading the sports section. And in the back of her mind, Gabriel was wondering if maybe she could actually hurt herself so that she wouldn't have to go to work. She would be late already. She had been standing there for over 10 minutes. Hurt herself? What was she thinking? And then she began to regain her senses. She finally pushed her head up and looked in the mirror. She wasn't the woman from then, she had to say to herself as she sneered at her reflection. But all she could see was long, blonde, straight hair, a golden glow from the sun, from the days where she didn't work as often as she did now, when she had a different life. She had to pull on her hair to remind herself that it was actually short. She pulled until she almost cried. Then she stopped, straightening her jacket, took a deep breath, and walked out to the bathroom door. Eric started to worry. As they carpooled together to work, Gabriel just sat in the passenger's seat, right hand clutching the door handle, left hand grabbing her briefcase, holding it with a fierce, ferocious grip. But it was a grip that said she was scared of losing that briefcase, or her favorite teddy bear from the other kids at school, or her life from a robber in an alley. If nothing else, Eric knew she felt fear, and he didn't know why. He tried to ask her. She said she was tired, but tense, an important meeting and the pounding headache. He knew it was more. She almost shook as she sat there in the car, and she began to rock back and forth, forward and back as she sat there, and she was sitting there slightly moving, the way a mother would rock a child to calm her down. It made Eric tense, too, and scared. Work was a blur of nothingness. There were no meetings. The workload was light for a Friday, but at least the headache was there. That wasn't a lie. She hated lying, especially to Eric, but she had no choice, especially now with Jack lurking somewhere in the streets out there, winning his cases, wondering if his wife is dead or not. She never wanted him to know the answer. Eric called her a little after 4. "Hey, just wanted to check in and see if we were still going to dinner tonight. I made reservations for that new Southwestern place. You said you wanted to go. Does it sound good?" Gabriel mustered up the strength to respond and only came up with, "Sure." "Do you still have a headache, honey? Do you want to just rent a movie or two and curl up on the couch tonight? Whatever you want to do is fine. Just let me know." She knew at this point he was doing all he could to make her feel better. She didn't want to put him through this. He shouldn't have to deal with her like this. She searches for a second wind. "No, Eric, dinner would be fine. We can go straight from work to save the drive. Thanks, too. You really have a knack for making my days better." Eric smiled at the end of the line, and Gabriel could feel it. They got off the phone. She finished her work, turned off her computer, started walking toward the elevator when it finally occurred to her Jack might be there. She can't go. Even if he's not there, she could see him on the street, driving there. She just couldn't go. She pressed the button for the elevator, and he could just as easily see me walking out of work, getting into Eric's car, she thought. I have to stop this. I have to stop acting like this. This is ludicrous. And he won't be there. He won't see me because, well, the chances are so thin. And hell, it's a big city. I have to try to relax. But she couldn't. And there was no reason she should have. At the restaurant, they sat in the upper level near one of the larger Roman columns decorated with ivy. She kept looking around one of the columns because a man 3 tables away looked like Jack. It wasn't, but she still had to stare. The meal was delicious. The presentation was impeccable. She was finally starting to relax. The check arrived at the table right as the place began to get crowded, so Gabriel went to the washroom to freshen up before they left. She walked through the restaurant, feeling comfortable and confident again. She even attracted a smile from a man at another table. She walked with confidence and poise. She loved life again. She walked into the bathroom, straightened herself up to the mirror, checked her hair, her lipstick. She looked strong, not like she looked when she was married. She closed her purse, turned around, and headed out the door. And that's when she saw him. There he was, Jack, standing right there, waiting for a table. He had 3 other men with him, all in dark suits. She didn't know if they were mob members or firm associates, or private eyes he hired to find her. Dear God, she thought, what could she do now? She just can't go to the table. He'll see her for sure. She can't stare at him. It'll only draw attention to herself. And then she thinks, wait, all I've seen is the back of him. It might not even be him. She took a breath. It's probably not even him, she thought. And now sat here worrying about it. Still, she couldn't reassure herself. She took a few steps back and waited for him to turn around. A minute passed, or was it a century? And finally, he started to turn. And as they were about to be led to the table, she saw his profile, just a glimpse of his face. It was him. It was Jack. It was the monster she knew from all of those years, the man who made her lose any ounce of innocence or femininity she ever had. She saw how his chin sloped into his neck, the curve of his nose, how he combed his hair back, and she knew it was him. By the washroom, she stared at him while he took one step away from her, closer to the dining room. And then she felt a strong pulling hand grip her shoulder. Her hair slapped her face as she turned around. Her eyes were saucers. "The check is paid for. Let's go," Eric said as he took her jacket from his arm and held it up for her. She slid her arms through the sleeves, Eric pulling the coat over her shoulders. She stared blankly. He guided her out the door. She asked him if they could stop at a club on the way home and have a drink or two. They found a little bar, and she instantly ordered drinks. They sat for over an hour in the dark club listening to the jazz band. It looked to Eric as if she was trying to lose herself in the darkness, in the anonymity of the crowded lounge. It worried him more, and still, she didn't relax. And she drove on the expressway back from dinner. Eric was in the seat next to her. He had noticed she had been tense today, more than she had been whenever he asked her why she brushed off the symptoms as nothing in the past. The radio blared in the car as the car was soaring down the 4 lanes of open, slick, raw power, and she heard the DJ recap the evening news. "A man died in a car accident," he said, and it was the lawyer defending the famed mob leader. And then the radio announced his name. She didn't even have to wait to hear it. Time stopped for a moment when the name was spoken. Jack Huntington, like a disease over the airwaves. Jack, the name crept into her car and she couldn't escape it, like contaminated water, and infiltrated all of her body, and she instantly felt drugged. Time stood in a horrific silence for Gabriel, hearing that, if he only sat silent, she would eventually talk. While still in the car, 10 minutes later, she began to tell him about Andrea. 3 years ago, when I moved to the city, my name wasn't Gabriel. It was Andrea. 7 years ago, I was a different person. I was a lot more shy, insecure, an 18-year-old in college, not knowing what I wanted to study. I didn't know what my future was, and I didn't live alone. My freshman year, I met the man in the law school program at school. He asked me out as soon as he met me. I was thrilled. For the longest time, I couldn't believe that another man, especially one who had the potential for being so successful, was actually interested in me. He was older. He was charming. Everyone loved him. I followed him around constantly, wherever he wanted me to go. He met my parents right away. They adored him. A man with a future. He was so charming. They pushed the idea of marrying him. I didn't see it happening for a while, but I felt safe with him. And every once in a while, after a date or to a party, we'd be alone, and he'd start to yell at me about the way I acted with him, or what I said in public, or the way I looked was wrong, or something. And every once in a while, he would hit me. And whenever it happened, I thought, I should have looked better, or I shouldn't have acted that way, or maybe this man was just too good for me, and I had to do everything in my power to make him happy. Less than 8 months after we met, he asked me to marry him. I accepted. We were married 2 years after we met. It was a beautiful ceremony, tons of flowers, lots of gifts, and I was turning a junior in college. My life, my future was set for me. I couldn't believe it. And as soon as we were married, which was just right about when he started the firm, he got more and more violent. And instead of thinking that it was my fault, I started thinking more and more that it was because he was so stressed, that he had so much work to do, that sometimes he just took it out on me. It was no one's fault. Besides, if he was going to climb to the top, he needed a wife that was perfect for all of his appearances. I had to be perfect for him. Take care of the house, and go to school full-time. Money wasn't a problem for us. He had a trust fund from his parents that made good, and he made good money at the firm, so I couldn't go to school. But he started to hate the idea that I was going to college in marketing instead of being his wife full-time. But that was one thing I wasn't going to do for him, stop going to school. He'd get more and more angry about it the longer we were married. After the first year, he'd hit me at least once a week, and I was physically sick half of the time, and sick from being worried about how to make him not hurt me, sick from trying to figure out how to cover up the bruises. I tried to talk to him about it, but a few times that I ever actually said anything, I ever actually had the courage to bring it up, he beat me. He just beat me, say a few words, apologized the next morning, think everything was better. I couldn't take it. I threatened with divorce. When I did that, I had to go to the hospital with a broken arm. I had to tell the doctors that I fell down the stairs. A long flight of stairs. When it was approaching 2 years of marriage with this man, I said to myself that I couldn't take it anymore. He told me over and over again that he'd make me pay if I tried to leave him. I'd be sorry, and it would be the worst choice that I'd ever make. The man had power, too. He could hunt me down if I ran away. He could emotionally and physically keep me trapped in this marriage. So I did the only thing I thought I could do. I wrote a suicide note. By the time you find my car, I'll be dead. I took a few essentials, nothing that could say who I was. I cut my hair. I used to have long hair that I dyed blonde. I chopped it all off and dyed it dark. And then I drove out to a quarry off the interstate 20 miles away from the middle of the night, threw my driver's license and credit card in the passenger seat, put a brick on the accelerator, got out of the car and just let it speed over the cliff. Everything was ruined. So there I was, 22 years old, with no future, with no identity. My family, my friends would all think that I was dead in the morning. And for the first time in my life, I was so alone. God, I was so scared, but at the same time, it was the best feeling in the world. It was good not to have long hair brushing up against my neck. It felt good to feel the cold of the 3 a.m. night air hitting my cheeks, on my ears. It felt good to have nowhere to go other than away. No one was telling me where to go, what to do. No one was hurting me. I found my way 2 hours away to the city, came up with the name Gabriel from a soap opera playing at a clinic that I went to get some cold medicine. I managed to job at a company that I worked at now, did volunteer work, rented a hole for an apartment, projected a few of the right ideas to the right people in the company. I got lucky. She told him all this before she told him that her husband's name was Jack Huntington. She brought him home, sat on the couch while he made coffee for her. He tried to sound calm, but the questions kept coming out of his mouth one after another. Gabriel's answers suddenly streamed effortlessly from her mouth, like a river spilling over into the floor, covering the living room with inches of water with their half-hour talk. She felt the cool water of her words sliding around her ankles, and she felt relieved. Gabriel, Andrea, it was no longer Miss Jack Huntington. Eric told her that she could have told him before, "I'd follow you anywhere. If I had to quit my job and run away with you, I would." It hurt him that she kept this from him for so long, but he knew that he was the only person who knew her secrets. He smiled. There was a burden lifted, she felt, and with Jack's death, the burden that she didn't have to hide who she was anymore. She didn't have to worry about public places, cower when she felt his presence following her, haunting her. It's over, she thought. She can walk out into the street and she could scream and run and laugh, and no one would come walking around the corner to force her back into the life she had, that little private hell, when she was named Andrea. But sitting there, she knew there was one thing left that she had to do. She put down her coffee, got on her coat, told him there was something she must do. Gabriel got into her car, started to head away from the city. As she left, Eric asked where she was going. She knew she had done what she could for the last 3 years of her life to save herself. But now it was time for her to go back to the past, no matter what the consequences were. He thought she was going back to her family. She was, in a way. She drove into the town, saw the trees along the streets, and remembered the way they looked every fall when the leaves started turning colors. She remembered that one week every fall when that time was right, each tree's leaves were different from every other tree. This is how she wanted to remember it. And she drove past her old town, over an hour and a half away from the city, passing where her parents or brother would still be living. She didn't know if she would ever bother to find them. Right now, all she could do was drive to the next town where her old friend used to live. Best friends from the age of 3, Sharon and Andrea were inseparable, even though they fought to extremes. And as she drove toward Sharon's house, she knew she'd have to move quickly if Sharon's husband was still there. She double-checked the phone book at a nearby gas station. When she turned 2 more corners, she parked her car across the street. Would she recognize her? Would she believe that she was there? That she was even alive? Gabriel saw 1 car in the driveway, not 2. So she went to the window, and looking in, she saw only Sharon. She stepped back. She took a long, deep breath. She was a fugitive, turning herself in. She was a fugitive, asking people to run with her, running from something, yet running free. She knocked on the door. Through the drapes, she saw the charcoal shadows come up to the door. It creaked open. There they stood, looking at each other for the first time in 3.5 years. Sharon paused for what seemed a millennium. Her eyes turned to glass, turned to a pond glistening with the first rays of the morning sun. Andrea? She could see through the brown curls wrapping around her face. Another long silence. Sharon's voice started to break. "You're alive," she said as she closed her eyes and started to smile. And Gabriel reached through the doorway as the door closed, as they held each other. They sat down in the living room. In the joy, Sharon forgot about the bruises on her shoulders. Gabriel noticed them immediately. They talked only briefly before Gabriel started to ask her, "Is Paul here?" "No, he's out playing cards." "He should be out all night." "Things are the same, aren't they?" "Andy, they're fine. He's just got his ways." And Sharon turned her head away, physically looking for something to change the subject. There was so much to say, yet Sharon couldn't even speak. And then Gabriel's speech came out, the one she had been rehearsing in her mind her entire car ride over, the speech she gave to herself for the years before this very moment. "Look, Sharon, I know what it's like. I can see the signs. I know you, and I know you'll sit through this marriage like I would have, this unending cycle of trying to cover the bruises on your arms and make excuses." Sharon moved her arm over her shoulder. Her head started inching downward. She knew Andrea knew her just too well, and she couldn't be able to fight her words, even after 3 years. "I went through this. When Jack told me I'd never be able to leave him, that I'd be sorry if I did, that I'd pay for trying to divorce him, that's when I knew I couldn't take it anymore. No man has the right to tell me, or you, what you can and can't do. It hasn't gotten better, like you keep saying it has it? No, I know it hasn't. It never does. I know this sounds harsh, and it is. If I was willing to run away so convincingly that my own family thought I was dead, then it had to be serious. Do you think I liked leaving you, my brother? Do you think things were easy?" Gabriel paused, trying to lean back, take a deep breath, relax. "No, it wasn't easy, but I had to do it. I had to get away from him, no matter what it took. In spending my life with him, I was losing myself. I needed to find myself again." They sat there for a moment, a long moment, while they both tried to recover. "You don't have to run away," Gabriel said to her. "You don't have to run away like I had to, but he won't change. You do have to leave him. Let me help you." Within 45 minutes, Sharon had 3 bags of clothes packed and stuffed into Gabriel's trunk. As Sharon went to get her last things, Gabriel thought of how Sharon called her Andy when she spoke. God, she hadn't heard that in so long. And for the moment, she couldn't unravel the mystery to find out who she actually was. Sharon came back to the car. Gabriel knew that Sharon would only stay with her until the divorce papers were filed and she could move on with her life. But for tonight, they were together, the inseparable Sharon and Andy, spending the night playing house, creating their own world when everything was exactly as they wanted. And this was real life now, and they were together with a whole new world to create. They were both free and alive, more alive than either of them had ever felt. "I want you to meet Eric. He's a good man," Gabriel said. And as they drove off to nowhere, to a new life, to a new expressway, under the viaduct, passing the projects, the baseball stadium, heading their way toward traffic of downtown life, they remained silent, listening to the hum of the engine. For Gabriel, it wasn't the silence of enabling her oppressor. It wasn't the silence of hiding her past. It was her peace for having finally accepted herself, along with all of the pain, and not feeling the hurt. Andrea. Gabriel. The next morning, she didn't know which name she would use, but she knew that someone died that night. Not Jack, but someone inside of her. But it was also a rebirth. And so she drove. What's luggage?